Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the PEDAL Pride and Equality at TripleLift poolside chat. Today, we'll be talking with three LGBTQIA+ identifying advertising industry professionals about their experiences and stories across their career. I'm Monica O'Kelly, VP of Global Revenue Operations at TripleLift and a proud lesbian identifying member of PEDAL. I'm very excited to moderate this discussion and for our panelists to share their stories with all of you. As we celebrate Pride Month and throughout this discussion, remember that Pride started with an uprising. It is a protest for the rights of the LGBTQIA+ identifying community, as well as a celebration of the hard-won rights that we have gained. The stories that our panelists share today will not all be easy, but they illustrate the resilience of the LGBTQIA+ community and how far we've come. We still have a ways to go in true equality and equity for the LGBTQIA+ identifying professionals. So I invite members of the community and our allies to listen, learn, and go forward to create positive, inclusive communities. If you have any questions throughout this conversation, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit questions. I'll ask them as time allows. With that, let's ask our panelists to turn on their cameras and start with the introductions. Mia, can you start us off?
Hi guys. So fun to be here, and thank you so much, Monica, and to the TripleLift team for having us. I'm very excited about this. So my name is Mia Birkhead. I'm the VP of Ad Operations at Ogury. I oversee the Americas team, so the team here in the US, as well as Latin America. My pronouns are she, her, and I identify as lesbian.
Jayne?
Hey everyone, my name is Jayne Peressini. Sonia, thanks for inviting me to this. She, her, and I used to run growth at EA for their mobile division, and now I'm VP of growth for Gala Games, which is a blockchain gaming platform. And I identify as lesbian, gay, natural blonde, Indian, all.
And Jason.
Hey there, so my name is Jason Jahn. I am the Senior Director of Agency and Product Marketing at Arts and Science, a media agency under the Omnicom Group umbrella. I identify as a gay man and my pronouns are he, his.
Great, thank you all. We're going to start off talking about the early days of your careers. So we're going to start off with stories of what was it like being a member of the LGBTQ+ community when you started your career. Jayne, I'd like to start with you, and then we'll go around the table.
Sure. I wasn't very open when I started my career, going into when I was like 22, 23, the message, even from my parents, are super cool now, but back then not as, just concerned about me, but was not to draw too much attention to the fact that I was gay. So I didn't really talk about my personal life. Most of my coworkers actually didn't know that I was gay until our wedding announcement got announced, like in the New York Times section, and then it got passed around. And so my early days, I was more focused on trying to build my brand and not be considered, oh, that's the gay girl in the office. I wish I had the clout now that I did back then to be like, yeah, like I'm gay and this is all great. But yeah, back then, very, very closeted, I would say.
Thanks for sharing. Jason, do you want to tell us about your start of your career?
Yeah, of course. I think just like Jayne, right? Like we grew up in an era where gay marriage wasn't even federally recognized yet, right? So there was definitely a shift in who you were and how you presented yourself in the workplace. Being gay wasn't as celebrated, I would say, when I first started out my career as it is now. And so it's something that I've learned to become a lot more comfortable and a lot more proud with, more proud about. There's definitely a shift occurring right now, which is really beautiful to see with the younger generation, Gen Z folks coming in to the workplace and being loud, proud, and not giving a care about who views them in what way. And, like Janie said, it's something that's really beautiful to see, something that I'm personally envious of, because I would have rather been my true self rather than put on a mask that other people interacted with. But I think that that's now something that I'm taking power back in and celebrating.
Thank you. And Mia?
Yeah, I think similar to both Jayne and Jason, I think we as an industry and as a community have just evolved a lot in how we, treat the LGBTQI plus community. I personally grew up in Oklahoma, which is a very conservative, very conservative state and community. And I personally didn't feel comfortable being out. So my first job out of college was in Oklahoma, and I just, I hadn't even come out to my family yet. So I was definitely not comfortable being out at work. And then I moved out to the East Coast after college and started working at AOL and places like the Washington Post and Everyday Health, where I was starting to get more familiar with myself and more comfortable with myself, but also really being introduced to people who felt more proud and out at work. And that sort of gave me the confidence to be more out myself. And just seeing those role models and having more of a community made it more comfortable for me. So I've definitely evolved a lot in my career. I think now more than ever, I am much more comfortable talking about my partners and saying their names and just being more of who I am. So I definitely have come a long way in the last 18 plus years.
Thanks, Mia. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the community that you found in workplaces, helping you feel more comfortable coming out, or maybe a company being more welcoming. How did your company's culture have an impact on your kind of comfort coming out and being open over time?
Yeah, so I think for me, again, just being at companies, I think early on in my career, the first phase of it was I had to start being really comfortable with myself. I didn't come out until I was in college. And so it really took me like a few years, maybe a little bit longer, even entering the workforce on the East Coast to really feel comfortable with myself. And so that was really the first step for me. But I don't think it was until I actually came to Everyday Health, which is where you and I met, that I just met such a great community of, queer folks in the community, and where I started to feel like, okay, I can really be who I am, and to have conversations and to meet people and build a community at work. A lot of that is just feeling safe at work and having that community and watching people be so out, and then watching companies be so receptive to that has been really great. At my current company, one thing that's been really great is we have a D&I group where we've created panels such as this, and where we've had really lengthy conversations as a company to talk about things like, the AAPI awareness or Black Lives Movement or LGBT and the Pride community. So I think those conversations are what have really helped me to feel more comfortable and safe and sharing my story and being more out.
Yeah, I think for me, it's been really interesting. I started out my career working as a consultant where sexuality wasn't really ever discussed, right? Everyone dressed up in business professional every day. So it wasn't something that was really even talked about. But then as I moved to New York and then I got started working in media, I found that there were so many safe spaces and sexuality was definitely more celebrated and prevalent. And when I went to AOL and HuffPost was in the same building, right? Like being weird and being different was a very cool thing. It was cachet. People had colored hair and painted nails and they dressed really fun. And I was like, wow, okay, like it's cool to be different. And so when I started at Hearts and Science, which was about 5 years ago, we started the agency from scratch. And so we didn't have anything built out. But I remember my CMO coming to me, and this was about 2 months in the Hearts and Science, and it was about June, and she was like, Jason, what are we going to do for Pride? And I was like, wow, what a cool question to get, like, especially from leadership, right? And so having that investment from the top really felt empowering. We were able to like throw a big Pride party, and we've done something every year since, and we brought in balloon arches and rainbow jello shots and, all different kinds of things. Last year or 2 years ago before the pandemic, we brought in a drag queen from RuPaul's Drag Race, and we had it at the PhD rooftop, and it was a whole company-wide celebration. That was really, really fun to see. And it was really great because it wasn't just, the LGBT community at Hearts, but it was the entire company showing up and just having a blast. And I think my favorite feedback from all of that is that everyone just had such a good time, right? And it wasn't about who was gay, who was straight, but it was all just everyone celebrating each other and the humanity in it all.
Well, I don't know how to follow that one. I would say for me, like I've been at companies that are 30 people. I've been at company like EA is thousands and thousands of people. EA has a legit ERG group for LGBTQ plus, and that is if it was very buttoned up. I at Reddit, 30 people. It was a queer culture though, of like a lot of misfits and things that maybe Jason talked about. But like if you had purple hair, you had a little bit more clout than if you were actually dressed a little bit more normcore. And now I'm at a company again that's like 20, 30 people. I haven't figured it out yet on day 2, so we'll see. I think the other thing about the community aspect is something that was really great at EA was that we connected a lot with like the mental health ERG, and like I was part of that too. I suffer from bipolar type 2, and so kind of recognizing too that you're not just gay, that you can also have other things that impact or you identify with, whether it be mental health or part of we had a B group, which is Black and African American group, and there's all these other maybe you come from low income, there's all these other things that you can identify with rather than just saying I'm gay, which I think is also good to know that there's some dimension to people.
The intersectionality of identities, obviously very important and increasingly important now, recognizing that we're not just one feature of ourselves, we're kind of a full, well-rounded person. I'd love to explore a little bit more. You all mentioned, the kind of process of coming out is a little different at every company. And one of the things that is, being talked about more now is you don't just come out once, you come out with every person that you interact with, and you make that decision of when do I tell them, how do I tell them, do I tell them in every interaction. Mia, can you tell me about kind of that calculation and experience?
Yeah, I mean, I don't typically just like walk into a conference room and announce it. I want it to be, again, if you want to get to know me, I want it to be a conversation and relationship building, and I want that to come naturally. The same with different aspects of my life, like what is my race? I want that to come organically. I don't want to have to just announce it for other people's benefit. And I think for me, what's really important is making sure that I'm staving off assumptions. Sometimes there's like an assumption of like, if I do have a conversation of like, hey, what did you do this weekend? And I talk about my partner and I did this, and then they ask questions and it leads to the understanding that my partner is a woman. The initial gut reaction is like, I didn't expect you to be gay, or, oh, you don't look like you're gay. And so it's, that conversation typically happens quite a bit when I come out to coworkers, and that in itself is a bit of a jarring conversation, because that means that there's some sort of stereotype or bucket that this person has placed me in based on purely how I look or maybe how I act or talk. And so a lot of, that's one conversation, but, just making sure that it's organic and, again, conversational. Like, I don't want to have to announce it to every coworker, but just through conversations of, my personal life as we get to know each other. I'm constantly like, yeah, so my partner and I, Sam, and we live here, and here's what we do on the weekends. And it's usually some bit of conversation of like, oh, I didn't realize, or, so that's always, it's a tricky conversation to navigate. And it's one that I'm becoming more comfortable with, but yeah, feels really important to some people that they are able to bucket you or categorize you. And so sometimes coming out to people, it spurs more questions of like, I didn't expect that, or, yeah.
Yeah, I think like Mia said, right? Like I would say when I first started out my career and even when I was in college, there was a lot of emphasis on like the light switch, like who do I tell and who do I not, and who do I mask myself for? And so at the beginning, right, I would say when someone asked me what I did for the weekend, I'd be like, oh, well, I went out with friends to brunch, or, we went to some bars, and just being like very nondescript about it, keeping it very general in the hopes that it wouldn't become a conversation or a topic that even needed to be addressed. But I would say as I've gotten older and as I've gotten more comfortable with myself and my lifestyle or who I am, it's something that I talk about more freely. Like with Pride happening this weekend, right? I was very excited to tell everyone like, hey, we're doing all these parties and I'm going over to my friend's house and I'm painting my nails and all this fun stuff. Which I, was never really in a place of security to do that before. And listen, that's definitely something that comes with maturity, growing up and everything like that. But it's also feeling that safe space of inclusivity around your coworkers, around your friends, that sharing that type of information is not going to be used against you, right? I think we all have this fear that sometimes, and rightly so, right, that sometimes information can be used against us. And so we try to protect ourselves to make sure that, we stay within a safe space. But it's something, again, like that I'm becoming a lot more comfortable with as I'm growing up.
I I don't like I don't come out in terms of like, the officialness, I guess, of coming out. I say I have, oh, my wife and I, similar to like my say like me, it's like I have a wife. We went out this weekend, I have kids, like connect the dots, like I'm gay. And I kind of equate it to like when people start asking me a lot of questions, I flip it. I've been in sports and gaming for a while now, and I flip it back and I'm like, what if I asked you like, oh, are you obsessed with sports because you sucked at sports growing up and you have a complex about it, and so that's why you're so obsessed with sports? Like, like so many assumptions about like, oh, well then, are you the masculine one? And do you have crushes on all your friends that are girls and like all that kind of stuff? So all the assumptive questions, I try to just flip back at them and be like, you're probing into a lot of things that you're, just like, here's the mirror.
I think that's a really important point of, just we're normal people. Would you ask that question if you didn't have an assumption about my sexual orientation or just learn something new? How can allies help a coworker or professional peer who has come out or has, disclosed something about their orientation or something about their identity that you didn't know, either helping directly or minefields that maybe they should be sensitive to?
Well, I think Jayne touched on a really good one, which is kind of holding the mirror up in front of you. I mean, do you want all of these probing questions? I mean, and are these questions truly to get to know us, or are they just for your own edification? So is it just so that you can figure out in your head how to bucket us or to think about our relationship? Then that's probably not that's probably not the right tactic. But if it's truly to get to know us, then rest assured through that conversation and through relationship building, you'll just get to know us. You don't need to know who's the masculine one, who's the feminine one to understand who we are as people. That's not relevant to that conversation or to our relationship building. And I think along the lines of assumptions, don't assume people's pronouns. We're not all binary, and just making sure that you're really conscious and just thoughtful about how you approach people in conversations that way as well. And again, back to the assumptions, like the need to like bucket people into like, oh, you're a woman who dates a woman, you must be a lesbian, or you're a man who dates a man, you must be just a gay man. I think that, again, there's a whole spectrum, and we need to be a lot more thoughtful in our language and making sure that we're being mindful that not everything is according to your own categorization.
Yeah, I think that's like nicely put. I was an ally too. Like, I think don't stress so much, to like listen, don't diarrhea out of the mouth, just listen and be, if it comes from the heart, even if you mess up, if it comes from the heart, it'll be fine. Just, I think too, as maybe I'm coming off to a little direct or harsh about like, these are all things that piss me off. It's also like, you want to be my friend, like be my friend. Don't, go in with like acting like you're Oprah or something like that with the questions. And think about too, like through, day to day. And I think a lot of the social justice stuff that happened during our COVID times helped us realize or just shine a light too on what people go through. I didn't realize what Asian Americans went through until, I started seeing it in the news and started talking to my friends that I've never talked to my friends that were Asian Americans, being like, how is your life different? And then they started going into how they perceive their career even that's differently. And, if anything, it's just humanizing and being empathetic. Don't ask the salacious questions. Ask like, my experience, your experience.
Yeah, and I think, right, like treat others the way that you would want to be treated, right? Only ask the questions that you would feel comfortable answering yourself. One question that I hear a lot is like, if I'm dating someone, like, oh, well, who's the man in the relationship? And I'm like, well, we both are, right? And why do we have to assign like a gender role to who I'm dating, right? Or like, who's the more dominant or who's the more submissive one in the relationship, or why does there have to be some sort of power hierarchy like that, right? We are both equals, we are both partners. There's no reason to create that like weird dynamic in space. And it's just funny because like I would never go up to like a straight couple and be like, okay, well, who wears the pants in your relationship, right? That's something between the two of you, and that's not something that I need to know. It doesn't do me any good. So I would say treat others with the same respect that you would want to be treated with.
I think the last thing I would say about this is it's also the educational piece. We live in a time where you can literally find resources and information about anything on the internet, which is amazing. And so educate yourself, don't put it all on us to just educate you all the time. And I think for me personally, just around a variety of topics, there's so much information out there. And if you really want to understand where I'm coming from on something, do the reading or listen to podcasts or, read articles and, and then you can come to me and we can have a thoughtful conversation. And to Jayne's point, you're not just asking me pointed, questions for your benefit.
Yeah, it's the same thing as what Jayne and Mia said, right? Like for Black Lives Matter or Stop Asian Hate and everything else, or even, everything that went on with the Jewish community or is going on with the Jewish community. There are so many resources, thought pieces out there that you can go and research yourself. I mean, just go look at medium.com. There's plenty of people with a lot of things to say and learn about. And that's always like a really great place to start because not all of us are very eloquent in the way to explain what's going on in the world or have that same capacity or security. But there's a lot of work that's already been done that you can go out there and educate yourself on.
Thank you. Jason, you've touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to dive in a little bit more into kind of how your expression of your identity has shifted over the course of your career, as you've kind of explored and become comfortable with sharing different facets of yourself in your professional space.
Yeah, I think that's something that I'm still learning about, right? And still coming to terms with. One example that sounds a little funny is, I'm friends with a lot of my coworkers on social media, and that's something that's happened ever since, I joined the workforce, right? It's a natural thing to want to see what your coworkers are up to on their weekends. And I'll never forget, like the first time I went to Fire Island and I posted a picture of me and a bunch of friends in a Speedo, or Speedos, we weren't all just in one Speedo. And I came back into work on Monday and everyone was like, wow, like, look at him, you're wearing a Speedo, showing a lot of skin on social media. And I was like, well, yeah, like we were all just out in Fire Island for the weekend and we were having fun. And, that's the bathing suit choice that we wanted to wear. And why is that something that's now drawing attention to me at my work? And the thing that I find really fascinating about it is that it's happened more than once. It's happened pretty much at every job. And as I've progressed throughout my career and as I'm getting more senior, now I'm friends with the CEO and CMO and, C-suite. And I even recently, as of like 2 years ago, had someone who was very senior at my company come up to me and say, hey, you're friends with the CEO on Facebook. I think you should be more careful about what you're posting to your social media. And now, mind you, I'm not posting anything salacious or sexual in nature. It's just me and my friends at a pool or a beach. But now I feel like I have this air of censorship that I need to provide. And I really struggled with that for a very long time. And then I realized, listen, this is my life. I'm the one that's posting on it. If it makes you uncomfortable, don't friend me or unfollow me or what have you. There's no need for you to come into my space and dictate what I should or should not post. Like, you don't have that agency or authority over me. And I don't, listen, if you are wearing a bathing suit or a dress that maybe doesn't fit right or that, isn't, in style, I wouldn't be like, hey, wow, your dress is so last season. Maybe you should think about posting that. Like, it was such a weird thing to say. And it's still something that's so weird to hear. That again, I'm still coming to terms with it, but I'm also becoming more selective with who I let into my social media circles, right? Because if that's something that is now a recurring theme, then it's also a little bit on me to be more choiceful in who I let inside.
I've always wondered what my appearance, like, I don't know if I like fit the mold for being, I mean, I have a backwards hat on and things like that, but like, if I were more presented more like masculine, if that would have changed, if that changed, my experience working, because I haven't gone through maybe things that Jason has. I mean, but I also, I don't want to be stereotypical, but like, we lesbians have a very different dress code when it comes to Pride typically. But, I'm also a mom. And so there's comments too about like, oh, well, moms don't wear that and things like that. And so I think that any bucket or anything, it's a slippery slope when you start to be like this, you need to present as a heterosexual man or woman. And this is like the dress code. I think it is upsetting that typically when you think about Pride, it gets sexualized by some people. And the reality is it's people trying to express their true self as a collective. And so you have to uncouple that, like a Speedo is not a sexualized thing. It is however you want to dress because you don't want tan lines like that, otherwise like you're going to show up, like, what are you going to show up in a wetsuit or something like that when, all your friends are in Speedos. So similarly, like, it's hard to pull apart stereotypes and the sexualization of it, but you have to in order to understand like people present themselves however they want, and it's not to also identify as something. Like, it's not a political statement to wear a Speedo, and it's not a political statement to wear a plaid. And I think that also needs to be like something people need to recognize.
And that kind of goes back to the last question about how can colleagues, be more respectful of, the queer community. It's again, if we're, it's already so challenging for us to come out and to be really comfortable with who we are in the workspace, especially in an environment where everyone are mostly straight. And so, if we do open up and present ourselves and present who we truly are, then you don't need to make comments. You just don't need to, or don't follow us on Instagram or Facebook or whatever social media. But I think for me, I mean, just getting to the evolution of where my comfort level is, and it's still growing, is I'm going to be 42 actually this weekend, and this is the first time in my career that I've been as vocal about my coming out story and who I am to such a public community. So I feel like, similar to Jason, like I'm still evolving. I'm still trying to figure out how to be, you know, more comfortable and out, and how to be more supportive to other queers in the community and the workplace. So I feel like this is just an ongoing sort of growth for all of us.
And just a positive spin on the Speedo story. I actually ended up going to my CEO after all of that and just point blank asking him, like, hey, I got a weird comment from this person about me wearing a Speedo and that it might make you uncomfortable. Is that true? And he was like, oh God, no. He was like, wear whatever you want. Like, and also F her for saying that. That's really not cool. And so it was just such a positive experience that I made myself vulnerable to that person, and then in return received such a safe and affirming reaction. So it's not always like, that's not the message that the other person is thinking or believing, but it's someone else projecting their own thoughts or their own experience onto what should be or should not be. So there's something, you know, about, you know, the whole Brene Brown about daring greatly and being vulnerable, and that creating a safe space in a place where you originally did not receive that.
I'm so glad that you received that affirmation, that your Speedo was not a problem for the CEO, because if they had any opinions about your Speedo, I'd be a little worried about that. So you have all been, you know, in the workplace for, you know, the time before gay marriage was legal across the country. I mean, I was at Everyday Health with Mia the day that the Supreme Court ruled, and the entire office emptied out to go celebrate outside of Stonewall. And it was an amazing day. And I think that led to a really large shift in how people are able to identify and express their identity in their professional space. Let's talk a little bit about how you see people who are newer in their career expressing their identity, compared to how you expressed your identity and before, early in your career, and also how you express your identity now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Marriage Equality Act really, it really not only opened people's sort of mind, but in their mindset, but it really almost gave, I feel like, just through conversations I've had with people, it almost gave them permission to be supportive of the queer community in this really odd way, to say, hey, I see you guys celebrating, and I feel like this is something that I now feel comfortable celebrating with you. And so I think that what we're doing for the younger generation is we're paving this way to say, hey, look at us, like we're open and we're out and we're comfortable and we're in this safe environment, and we're getting, aside from Jason's coworker's comment, we're getting pretty you know, really just encouraging and receptive feedback. And so it's making them feel more comfortable, and all the conversations we're having in the media is also making them more comfortable. I think about when I graduated in 2002, these conversations weren't happening. So I didn't have role models. I didn't have the safety that I feel now in my workplace and the community in general. And so I think that as we progress as a, you know, as a society, we're progressing, it just trickles down. We're progressing as corporations, we're progressing within our team, within our own community. And this is just allowing younger generation just to enter into this really safe space that personally, I think that a lot of us have paved, and even people way before us, to make us feel more safe in the workplace community.
Yeah, for sure. I think, you know, when I look back at the beginning of my career and, you know, my graduating class versus who's entering in our workforce now, and I see it, you know, in our younger associates and our interns, people are very loud and proud and out about who they are, whatever that means, right? Whether that is their sexual orientation or their heritage or culture or background or where they're from. You know, I think there used to be a box that everyone felt like they had to fit inside, and now it's not cool to be inside a box anymore. It's better to color outside the lines. And so you see people, or at least I've seen, more of an expression of self, which has been really beautiful to see. And it's definitely a shift from needing to normalize and be like that heteronormative version of whoever you are. You know, kids are coming out younger and younger now than ever before. And, you know, like me, I didn't come out until later in college, and I didn't even come out to my parents until I was about 24, which, you know, now feels very old comparatively to what other kids are going through. And they're actually hitting that gay puberty earlier than we are, or we did, because we went through 2 adolescents, right? We had an adolescence presenting as a straight adult, and then we went through, okay, well, what does it mean to be gay or lesbian? And so that's something that we're all still coming to terms with. But what a gift to the younger generation that they're able to identify who they are faster, and then be more secure in themselves and grow up as that person without having to mask who they really are.
Yeah, I think that's well put. I think of self-expression too in the younger generation, but also there's a lot of people that are realizing that maybe they are gay or bisexual or whatever later in their careers. And it's also important, I think, to not make that feel awkward for them too. It's almost like having to like be like, well, I've been straight for the last 10 years at this company. Now, actually, I decided to date a woman. It's like, you know, it shouldn't be awkward for them, or it should be kind of a non-issue. I was reflecting too, like a bit about people coming as who they are to work. And as a woman in gaming, as, you know, gay, as all these things, sometimes I get a little judgy of like, that mom is really annoying. Like, I don't like, you know, she drinks Pinot Grigio and blah, blah, blah. She's like super basic. But I have to also say, I need to fight on behalf of all mothers, and even her, even though I don't like her or I find her quite annoying. Similarly, like there's lesbians that annoy me, or straight people that annoy me. And you can't like filter or say like, well, this is a good gay person and this person is, you know, a terrible gay person. You kind of have to like, if you're going to support gay rights, you're going to support people of a certain group, you have to support all of them, not just like the cool kids or the ones that you identify with or align with. Like there's going to be people in any group that you're going to not like or clash with. And it's important to, you know, as women too, like you fight on behalf of women, not just ones you like. And so I think that's also great to see that maybe the younger kids out there are seeing that too, and not being overly selective about who they help, you know, as they grow in their career.
Thank you. So I'd like to shift a little bit into what companies can do to create an inclusive professional workspace. And I want to think about this in 2 pieces. One, like companies as a corporate entity, what they can do to help employees. And then we can talk about the, you know, human community, because I think those are 2 really important things in bringing your full self to your workspace. So Jayne, can you start us off with talking about what companies can do to create an inclusive professional workspace?
I think my main takeaway is on the benefits side. As a lesbian, obviously it's impossible to conceive naturally unless it's divine intervention. So you have to rely on like IVF and IUI and all these really expensive things. And most of that doesn't get covered by insurance unless you have like this very specific type of insurance that usually only larger companies support. And even then it's very selective. I remember a time when my wife and I were trying to get pregnant and my company didn't pay for fertility unless it was infertility. Like I documented, I could not have kids. And my wife's CEO, who's like owns one of the most expensive houses in all of San Francisco, walks in with his like 3rd wife that's super young. And that's all comped by insurance, company pays for it because that's infertility. And I remember being like, this is such bullshit that, I have to pay out the nose, and like this guy gets to get it paid for free because he decided that, he wanted a third wife that was like, his kid's age or something like that. So I just find it that benefits need to support all groups, and also think of it as like, it doesn't mean that if you give one group this, you have to give another group this. It's like just to make it an even playing field. Everyone should be able to have a child without having to pay a lot of money to have the kid, even for adoption support, things like that. And so I think it's like, it's not like, well, they got that, so I need this. I support groups having whatever they need in order to feel whole, and like we're all in the same playing field.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one. Just normalizing policies, regardless of your sexual orientation. So providing the same sets of benefits that you would provide to heterosexual couples or straight couples that you would to same-sex couples. And then normalizing conversations and language, like let's not ask questions of Jayne and Jason and Mia that you wouldn't ask of, other employees, normalizing, language around, one thing we did at Ogury was, creating sort of all gendered bathrooms, let's not assume everyone is binary. And then, just again, that education piece and the ongoing education piece. Let's not just celebrate Pride because of June, but let's celebrate Pride and queer employees throughout the year, and let's keep this conversation going. And the other thing is, there are a lot of groups out there that their whole organization is meant to support the queer community. So donate to those communities, especially the trans community. Folks in the trans community, especially the youth trans community, they're really suffering right now. So, let's put our money where our mouth is. If you want to support these organizations, then, fund them so that these organizations that are experts in helping these communities can continue to do that.
Yeah, I think piling on top of all of this, it comes from two places, right? I think you need support at the top, and you also need organizations like ERGs embedded within the company to help guide the policies or the parties or the celebrations or whatever, right? Because a lot of the times I found leadership doesn't really know what to do, right? And so they kind of give that onus to the employees to kind of tell them, okay, well, what do we need to do, right? So on the opposite side, you also need an empowered ERG that's organized, that can help make those decisions, make those recommendations, but you also need to give them a little bit of budget too. You can't just create an ERG that doesn't have a seat at the table, right? You need to create an organization that actually feels like they can make a difference within the company. And that's not just for the LGBT community, but for any heritage, right? Like, you need a Black resource group, you need a Hispanic resource group, because we can only speak about our community, but there's all these other communities too that need their own representation. So it's creating a inclusive, diverse organization that's supported by people at the top, but also given resources from the community itself to help create that symbiotic relationship, if you will.
Awesome. So let's take that transition straight into creating the best professional communities in your workplace, or kind of extending past your current employer. What are the facets or features of the best LGBTQ plus professional communities you've been involved in your careers?
I think one is, it's great that we're all panelists and gay, but even like you look at panels around women in tech, and it's all women, but it'd be nice to have man up there, to have different representation too, that can speak as an ally, that can speak in support. And And I know sometimes that feels awkward, like, oh, I don't want to take away from the spotlight of like an LGBTQ plus member, but it's also just not on us. Like, we're not only trying to do our full-time jobs, but then to somewhat burden us to take on an ERG, that's work. And to fight on behalf of the groups to have a seat at the table, like Jason said, that's also work. And to have an executive that's actually bought into an ERG is important, not just like of the figurehead, that actually helps organize the events and does that work rather than just sponsors a group, is really important to have like actual involvement. And they do work, and so do a lot of cis white people do work and everything else. It can't just be on, you know, the person that is actually the one that is impacted most as this ERG leader.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that sometimes what tends to happen is that the group that is suffering the trauma tends to also have to be the one to educate and comfort other groups and to understanding what we're going through. And so we do need some, you know, more representation and support from other people, maybe not in the community, who can help to be a better ally and to support other groups. And I think that Jayne made a good point about the executive level support. I mean, everything starts from the top, but that's just how corporations work. And we need more support from the top, and kind of, again, really being those role models, and starting with the language and the policies and the communication, and really helping to push that down so that other people can see that example and just start applying it to their own teams and to themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to follow up with what Jayne and Mia said. I completely agree, right? It's about creating that inclusive environment that people feel comfortable in, that they feel like they have power in, and that there is support from all levels, that they don't have to, you know, do their day job and fight for their own rights, right? God, doing your own job is enough in itself, especially these days. And then, you know, tacking on, okay, well, you know, I need fertility assistance, or I need equal parental leave, like fighting on top of that while you're going through a pregnancy or, you know, conceiving a child is, I can't even imagine. And I've seen people go through that, and it's really, really hard. So it definitely having that level of sponsorship and support from the inside as well is critical.
Thank you. That's definitely something TripleLift has focused a lot on. Petal is our LGBTQIA plus ERG. And we've really focused on building that ally and LGBT plus community, which I think is so critical. And we have had the support at the top, which has made things like these Pride panels and our entire Pride programming possible. So I'm going to give a little plug for Petal and TripleLift support of the community throughout this year and throughout Pride Month. So I don't think we have any questions in the Q&A section right now, but I'm going to kind of end out with some final round hot take questions. So I'm going to start off with first, representation matters. We have seen a significant increase in the amount of positive LGBT plus representation in media recently. Before it was not so great. Let's go around the table. What is your favorite TV show or movie featuring LGBTQIA plus stories?
So I'm on the board of Frameline, which is like an LGBTQ film festival, which everyone should have gone to. Go next year. Two come to mind. Legendary, which is on HBO Max. If you haven't checked it out, it's great. It's like the ballroom, you know, scene. It's like reality, you know, and it's a reality show too. So there's genres that maybe you'll align with. So ballroom, check that one out. And Shiva Baby, which actually we screened at the film festival last year. and it's a lot of like New York Jew bisexual girl going to a Shiva. Anyway, it's actually funny, even though it's based on her going to a funeral, but check it out. It's called Shiva Baby. I think you get it on Amazon Prime and a few other things. Yeah.
I think my favorite is still, it's an oldie. I think it's from back in like 2004, but it's called Saving Face. And I love it because it's about these two Chinese American women. So it was, for me, I think I watched it even before I came out, but it was great to see not only representation in the Asian community, but also in the lesbian community. And it just made me feel really comfortable. It was like one of those really like kind of mild, low key lesbian shows with like lots of sort of drama, but not like in this really wild, dramatic way. And so it was a really good entry point for me to see, again, two lesbians being represented in the Asian community and having a really positive experience. So I think that one's still probably one of my favorites. I love Simon. That was a movie that came out 5+ years ago. That was always that was one that was really enjoyable for me too.
Yeah, I think Mia stole mine. Mine is definitely Love, Simon, and also the follow-up Love, Victor. I've always been a rom-com fan at heart, and to be able to see a mainstream show about two teenage gays was really inspiring, because that's something that I never grew up with or saw in the media. And then so seeing it now later in life was just really heartwarming. And then separately, I don't know if anyone watches Elite on Netflix, but that's just such a juicy, salacious show that has so much weaved in. That, you have characters that are gay, that are bi, that are lesbians, that are trying to figure out their own sexual identity. And it's such a mainstream show that now it's just become so part of of pop culture, where we're normalizing sexuality. So I'm definitely a big fan of that one.
Awesome. And to close, 3 words for how you feel about the future of LGBTQIA+ identity and community at work.
Monica, this is a hard one.
It can be more than 3 words if you need it.
Rising, like I feel like a haiku now, like give me some more fun, dynamic. I'll do those 3. I swear I graduated college.
Yeah, I would say hopeful, optimistic, and I had a good third one. I'll come back to it.
Yeah, I think hopeful is a really good word. Hopeful, inclusive, open, hopefully.
Yeah, thriving is probably my third.
I love thriving. Definitely feeling hopeful. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Jayne, Mia, and Jason, for sharing your stories and experiences with us, and for being vulnerable with the audience. I know that it's not a super comfortable thing to do, so I really appreciate that. Thank you to Petal, the LGBTQ+ ERG at TripleLift, for making this panel happen and for inviting this crowd together. I hope everyone learned something today and has something to take back to your professional and personal communities. If you have any further questions or want to connect with us, please reach out on LinkedIn, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you all.